On our very first day in the American POW camp, we almost fought each other over a single cup of water. In the suffocating heat, our throats burning with thirst, I expected to be handed the usual warm, murky liquid that prison life was known for. But no, the Americans suddenly placed before me a cup of cold water, steaming with chill, with a few pieces of ice floating inside. The moment I raised it to my lips, someone shouted, "It's a trap! Don't drink it!" Another man lunged forward, trying to snatch the cup from my hands. Just a few gulps of cold water, and already honor, pride, and the fragile unity of Japanese prisoners began to crack apart. None of us had expected this. Before capture, we heard endless rumors that prisoners would be starved, beaten, forced to drink foul water from rusty barrels. Yet reality was the complete opposite. The Americans gave us full meals, issued us beds, even provided a medical station. I remember the moment vividly. The metal cup was icy in my hand, so cold it made me tremble. The water was crystal clear, ice cubes clinking inside. I hesitated, then finally brought it to my lips. The first sip made my teeth ache, but then a wave of coolness rushed down my throat. In that instant, I could only drink and drink, afraid it would vanish. When I finally set the cup down, I felt everyone's eyes fixed on me. Angry, suspicious, curious. One comrade growled, "You've fallen into their trap. The Americans want you weak, want you to betray Japan's spirit of endurance." Another shook his head, voice trembling. "But it's only water. What's wrong with cold water?" Someone else let out a bitter laugh. "We lost not only to their guns, we lost to small things like this." The whispers spread quickly across the row of prisoners. Within minutes, the camp was divided into two camps of thought. One side saw drinking cold water as shameful, a sign of weakness. The other side couldn't hide their craving, desperate for a cup like mine. The air grew thick with tension. A few men even stepped forward, ready to rip the cup from my hands and throw it away. The Americans looked on and burst out laughing. One of them sneered loudly, "They're more afraid of ice than artillery shells." I didn't catch every word, but enough to feel humiliated. Heat rushed to my face, my heart pounding. That sentence stabbed straight into our pride. Some prisoners snapped, nearly starting a brawl. The camp guards had to bark orders, forcing us back in line. But the matter didn't end there. That night in the barracks, the arguments still raged. One insisted that drinking cold water was betrayal. Another argued that refusing it was stubborn nonsense. The shouting grew so fierce I thought fists would fly, all of it born from a single cup of water. I lay on the wooden bunk, my sweat not yet dry. My mind replayed the image of that tiny cube of ice spinning in the cup. I couldn't deny it. It was the most pleasant sensation I'd felt since leaving home for the battlefield. Yet at the same time, shame stabbed at me. Why could the enemy give me something my own country could not? Was it a reminder that we had lost, not only in war, but in the basic comforts of life itself? I turned over, trying to close my eyes, but the more I thought, the more restless I grew. One truth was clear. From that day forward, the camp would never again be peaceful. That cup of ice water did more than quench my thirst. It carved a crack into the minds of every prisoner. And from that crack, arguments, divisions, and eruptions would surely follow. And that was only the beginning. Stay with the story, because what came next would leave you completely astonished. Before entering the American POW camp, I had braced myself for the worst. We had heard stories that prisoners would be starved, beaten, treated like garbage. Some even said American soldiers would tie us under the sun until we collapsed, then toss us a little filthy water to drink. In my mind, prison meant cruelty and humiliation. So, on that first day when we were escorted in, I walked with a heavy heart, waiting for disgrace to fall upon us. The final days on the battlefield still haunted me. We had no ammunition, no food, no hope. Every night, The sound of American artillery thundered without pause. Comrades fell one by one. I remember when I was captured, I was barely standing. My stomach empty, legs trembling, vision dim from hunger and thirst. I thought I might die right there on the road, never surviving long enough to tell the story. Yet instead of being beaten or abandoned, we were brought straight into a camp with sturdy wooden fences and watchful guards. They checked our weapons, stripped away our uniforms, then handed out clean clothes and a wooden bunk with a thin blanket. I could hardly believe my eyes. I had imagined chains like animals, but they simply told us to line up and follow orders. The first meal was another shock. White rice, some canned meat, fresh vegetables. Not delicious, but enough to fill my stomach after days of hunger. Even then, I stayed cautious. I thought, they're pretending. Their real face will show later. Fear outweighed any gratitude in my chest. And then came the water. In Japan, cold water was rare, especially during wartime. Even wealthy families had no refrigerators to make ice. We were used to drinking room temperature water or lukewarm tea. So when we saw a cup with ice in the American camp, our first reaction was disbelief. My mind spun with questions. Where did they get ice? Why give it to us? Was this some kind of trick? Because of all the dreadful rumors we had heard, drinking cold water didn't bring comfort, it brought unease. Some thought it was America's way of shaming us, giving us something our own country could not, making us feel inferior. Others feared drugs or chemicals had been slipped inside. And there were those who believed it was an attempt to buy us off, to turn us into men too easily subdued. I still remember the look in Saito's eyes, a corporal from my unit. He clenched his fists and hissed through his teeth, "Don't drink." They want us to forget endurance, to make us cowards. But right behind him, Nakamura whispered, "If survival means drinking a cup of water, why not? Aren't we human too?" That one sentence made others lash out, cursing Nakamura as a traitor. Just a cup of water, and already the air was pulled tight like a bowstring. I realized then it wasn't about thirst anymore. It was about something larger, whether we could still cling to the Japanese spirit. Truthfully, I was torn myself. I thought of home, my mother standing in ration lines, my younger brother probably drinking hot well water in the sweltering summer. Shame stung me because here I was, tasting a luxury my family never knew. Yet I couldn't deny it. The coolness saved me from fainting thirst. That night, I overheard hushed conversations in the barracks. Some swore we must resist America's trick by refusing cold water altogether. Others scoffed, saying such stubbornness only brought needless suffering. Soon the whispers turned into heated arguments, then insults. I lay still, silent, but my heart pounded. I knew that cup of cold water had done more than quench our thirst. It had opened a new crisis, a battle inside the camp itself. And I knew this was only the beginning. One morning, the American guards brought out metal mugs filled with a dark brown liquid that gave off a strange aroma. I caught a whiff, rich, bitter, unlike anything I had ever known. The soldier gestured for us to take them. I looked around. Everyone was hesitant. In Japan at that time, coffee was not a common drink. Most of us had never seen it. We had only heard vague whispers that Westerners enjoyed it greatly. Some muttered suspiciously, "It could be medicine. Maybe they've put something inside to weaken us." Others squinted at the dark black liquid and grimaced, saying it looked like bitter medicine. I hesitated too, yet the smell lingered, teasing my curiosity. I raised the mug to my lips and took a cautious sip. The bitterness hit my tongue immediately, making me wince. But then, a faint sweetness slipped through and a spreading warmth traveled down into my stomach. Strange as it was, even after a single sip, I felt more awake. Reactions erupted at once. Some prisoners spat it straight onto the ground, shouting, "Too bitter! How can anyone drink this?" Others frowned, shaking their heads, declaring it couldn't possibly be a normal drink. but a few, like me, found something oddly compelling about it. Nakamura, the same man who had been mocked as a coward for drinking the Americans' ice water, grinned and said, "Bitter, yes, but somehow pleasant. I want more." That set off the hardliners again. They accused the Americans of trying to corrupt our bodies with this strange drink. Saito growled, his voice firm as always. "Japanese men don't need this. It's their trick. Don't let yourselves be seduced." But this time, more prisoners dared to speak up. A younger soldier countered, "It's just a drink. I felt stronger after drinking it. If the Americans can live on it, why can't we try?" The debate flared up again. Yet unlike the argument over ice water, this was not only about honor or pride, it was about something tangible. Some prisoners truly felt the coffee sharpened their senses and eased their fatigue. After days of exhaustion, that was more precious than gold. I stood somewhere in the middle. To be honest, I disliked the bitterness, but I couldn't deny it. After finishing the whole mug, my head cleared, my heart beat faster, and I felt a rush of energy. The heavy heat of the day still pressed down on me, yet I felt more at ease. In the days that followed, the Americans continued to bring coffee each morning. The scene repeated itself. Some prisoners turned away defiantly, pretending to preserve dignity. Others scrambled to grab the mugs, drinking quickly as if afraid the chance would vanish. The camp once more divided into two camps, suspicion and temptation pulling us apart. Once, a group of stubborn prisoners deliberately poured their mugs onto the ground in front of the guards, as an act of protest, but the Americans only shrugged and laughed. "If you don't drink, even better. Saves it for us." Their indifference stung the rebels, making them angrier. Meanwhile, those who drank felt secretly justified, enjoying what others had thrown away. That night, I lay awake, thoughts circling endlessly. Cold water, coffee. To the Americans, these were nothing, ordinary things, but to us, each felt like a jolt, a strike against our pride. We had believed ourselves strong, unbreakable, yet these small comforts of daily life were enough to make us quarrel, rage, and divide. I began to see it clearly. America's strength did not lie only in weapons or numbers, but in the standard of living, in the ease with which they embraced things we had never known. The next day, when the guards brought coffee, I took the mug without hesitation. I no longer thought of honor or traps. I thought only of a simple truth. I was thirsty, I was tired, and this bitter black drink gave me strength. I knew arguments would continue, that the camp would wrestle with the meaning of this strange beverage, but I also knew that I had crossed a line within myself. From that morning on, coffee was no longer a mystery. It was a reminder that the world I came from was smaller than I had believed, and that beyond the barbed wire of the camp, another way of life awaited, one I had only just begun to glimpse. That afternoon, the camp manager announced that we would be taken to the shower. Many of us didn't even understand what the word meant, only guessing vaguely. I assumed it would be like the usual, washing in the army, just splashing our faces or pouring a few scoops of water over ourselves. But when we reached the bathhouse, we froze in shock. Before us was an entire row of rooms with shower heads fixed to the ceiling. When the water flowed, steam rose in blurred faces. A faint fragrance of soap drifted in the air. I had never seen anything like it. In Japan, hot baths were a luxury reserved for the wealthy or for public hot spring houses. In the army, bathing usually meant a bucket of cold water, shared among comrades. Yet here, inside a POW camp, the Americans gave us a chance to stand under a stream of endlessly flowing hot water. At first, many hesitated, afraid of a trap. Some stepped back, shaking their heads, unwilling to go in. A few whispered, "If they want to kill us, they could use boiling steam to scald us alive." But then an older prisoner stepped forward bravely. He stood beneath the showerhead, closed his eyes, and for a few moments said nothing. Then suddenly, he let out a long, relieved sigh. Seeing this, the rest of the group began to stir, slowly filing in. I walked toward one of the shower heads. The first touch of hot water on my back sent a shiver through me. At first it stung slightly, but soon a deep comfort spread through my body. The heat seemed to wash away sweat, dirt, and exhaustion. Then a guard handed me a smooth, round bar. I sniffed it. A gentle fragrance. Soap. When I rubbed it on my skin, white foam bloomed. Never in my life had I seen my own skin become so clean. Around me, others could not hide their amazement. Some laughed aloud under the spray. Are we prisoners or guests at a luxury bathhouse? Others scowled and muttered, "This is how they weaken us." Don't be fooled. But even those hardened men, after a few minutes, gave in, standing still under the hot water with closed eyes, silently enjoying it. After the bath, the entire camp looked transformed. Everyone was clean, their fresh clothes carrying the scent of soap. Men glanced at each other with shy smiles, as if embarrassed by their own enjoyment. Yet in their eyes, I saw something undeniable. Relief, comfort, even gratitude. That night, the barracks were full of talk. No one spoke of ice water or coffee anymore. The topic was the bath. One man said, "I never thought I'd take a hot shower as a prisoner." Another laughed. "If this is humiliation, then I'd gladly be humiliated again." But some still insisted, "Japanese men don't need such luxuries. This is just a trick to make us forget endurance." I lay listening without speaking. Inside me, a realization took root. The Americans had defeated us not only with bombs and guns, but with ordinary things like this. They lived in another world where cold water, coffee, soap, and hot showers were commonplace. For us, Japanese soldiers, those things seemed like privileges, so rare that we feared and doubted them. That night, my thoughts wandered back to my small village. Every winter, we fetched water from the well, icy cold, just enough for a quick rinse. My mother used to say, "As long as we're clean, that's enough." Hot water is a dream too far. I wondered if she could see me today, bathing under a steady stream of hot water in a camp far away. What would she think? Perhaps she would smile, then quietly cry. That bath etched a lasting mark in me. It made me realize that war was not just a clash of armies, but also a collision of ways of life. And in that battle, we had already lost, from the simplest, most ordinary things. The next day, just as the sun was setting, the American guards placed a large radio in the middle of the camp yard. At first, we assumed they would broadcast some kind of announcement or news about the war. But when the dial was turned, what poured from the speakers was not a voice of authority. It was music. The sound echoed across the camp, unlike anything we had ever known from military bugles or drums. It was lively swing music, full of brass and drums, with the clear, playful voice of an American woman singing. The cheerful rhythm bounced in the air, and many of us stood frozen, confused. Some pressed their lips together, lowering their heads, pretending to be indifferent. Yet I could see the truth. Several young prisoners were wide-eyed, as if each beat of the music had seized their hearts. I too was caught off guard. I had never heard music like this. Back in Japan during the war years, music was nothing but marches and patriotic anthems, stiff and repetitive, always urging us forward to fight and sacrifice. Music at home had one purpose: to harden us. But here, inside an enemy's prison camp, at a time when we were branded as defeated men, came a sound brimming with joy, with life. It was as if another world had opened before us. The atmosphere in the camp shifted. A few men tapped their fingers in time. Some tilted their heads slightly to the rhythm. Others muttered warnings. "Don't let it seduce you. This is meant to make us forget where we are." Saito, always the hardest among us, nearly shouted, "They want us to lose our roots. This music is not for Japanese ears." But Nakamura, who had been mocked again and again for weakness, spoke calmly. "If I am a prisoner and can still hear music, I don't feel I've lost anything. I only feel I'm still human." His words stirred the barracks into noise once more. Two sides, once again, arguing without end. But this time, not everyone was angry. Many fell silent, eyes far away, as though the music carried them back to families, wives, children, or youth before the battlefield. I sat alone and closed my eyes. The melody lifted me back to a memory from long ago when I was a boy and heard Chinese traders humming strange songs in the village market. Then, I had felt curiosity but quickly forgot, swept into drills, then into war. Now, locked in a prison camp, I understood what I had missed. Music could soften the hardest spirit, even in the harshest of places. One man clapped his hands over his ears and growled, "I can't listen. It makes me remember home too much." And he was right. As I listened, something stabbed deep inside me. I saw my mother again, pictured the small wooden house and the evenings when the family huddled around a charcoal brazier. War had stolen all of that from me. And here, it was the enemy who gave me a sound that reminded me of ordinary life. After that day, the radio would sometimes play again. Each time, the camp split in two. Some walked closer, eager to catch every note. Others turned their backs, refusing to acknowledge it, but no one could deny it. Music had slipped into our minds, whether we wished it or not. Slowly, I began to realize a painful truth. The Americans didn't need whips or chains. All they had to do was hand us fragments of their ordinary lives, cold water, coffee, soap, music, and we ourselves would start questioning our own country. That night, lying on the wooden bunk, I whispered to myself, if Japan loses, perhaps there are things we must learn from the enemy. The thought shamed me, but I could not push it away. In the Japanese army, medical care was almost non-existent. For minor wounds, a soldier might get a rough bandage at best. A serious wound meant certain death. Medicine was scarce and nearly always reserved for officers. I had watched comrades die from something as simple as a small cut that became infected. For that reason, none of us believed that in captivity the enemy would care about our health. But one morning, a young prisoner collapsed with a high fever. Everyone assumed he would be left to die. To our astonishment, the Americans immediately called for a medic. They carried him into a separate room with a white-sheeted bed and a proper examination table. Peeking through a window, we saw an American doctor wearing gloves, taking his temperature and giving him an injection. Some of us whispered in disbelief, "Is this a prison or a hospital?" I could hardly trust my eyes. In the Japanese army, we were always told, if you fall, accept it as fate. Don't expect to be saved. Yet here, our enemy was giving medicine, treating us like patients. The next day, we were handed small white pills to prevent illness. The guards simply said, "Aspirin." I had never heard the name before. Many prisoners were suspicious, refusing to take them, but a few tried, and to our shock, their headaches vanished quickly. The news spread fast, stirring quiet amazement. An older prisoner murmured, "If our country had medicine like this, my son might not have died of fever." His words silenced the entire barrack. Each of us was lost in thought, remembering family members, recalling those who had died helplessly from diseases with no cure. Saito, the toughest among us, still growled, "Don't forget, they are the enemy. We must not feel grateful." But soon after, he was struck by a violent cough that bent him double. The American doctor approached, offered medicine, and checked his pulse. Saito tried to push the doctor away, but in the end, he swallowed the pill. Hours later, his cough eased. Everyone watched quietly, and though no one spoke, We all knew, even the strongest among us could not deny the truth. American medicine had saved him. I felt more torn than anyone. My younger brother had died of tuberculosis just before I was drafted. All my family could offer him were a few herbal remedies. If we had possessed the kind of medicine I held in my hand now, perhaps he would have lived. That thought cut into me like a blade. From that point on, the camp began to change. Many prisoners grew less wary, gradually accepting the pills, letting the American medics examine them. No one admitted it out loud, but in their eyes I saw an unspoken acknowledgement. America's strength was not only in its military, but also in its daily life, something we had never even imagined. That night, I lay awake on my bunk. I did not feel the same anger I once had. Instead, shame settled heavily in my chest. We had always prided ourselves on endurance, on willpower, on an unbreakable spirit. Yet here, the enemy provided us with things our own homeland could not: clean water, coffee, soap, music, medicine. Each small thing struck like a hammer against our pride. I realized then that our defeat was not only on the battlefield, it lay in the gap of civilization itself. The Americans lived in another world, where what they saw as ordinary was to us a luxury beyond reach. And it was that gap, more than guns or bombs, that reminded us we had already lost. The day the war ended, the news reached our camp faster than we could have imagined. The American guards announced that Japan had surrendered. The entire camp fell into silence. Some prisoners broke down in tears, while others sat in stunned stillness. We all knew then that life would never be the same again. I remember the moment I stepped out of the camp gates after months of captivity. There were no chains, no whips, no punishments awaiting us. Instead, what I carried back with me was a burden of memories heavy on my heart. Memories of the first cup of ice water that set the whole camp into an uproar. Memories of tasting bitter coffee that somehow cleared my mind. Memories of hot water and soap washing me clean in a way I had never known. Memories of American songs floating across the yard, joyful yet piercing with sorrow, and memories of the small white pill that saved my comrade's life. To the American soldiers, none of these were luxuries. They were merely ordinary parts of daily life. But to us, Japanese soldiers, each one was a cultural shock, a blow to our pride. I once believed our defeat came only from guns, atomic bombs, and failed strategies. But the truth stood before me. We had already lost in the smallest details of everyday living. On the road back to Japan, sitting in the back of a truck with dozens of other prisoners, hardly anyone spoke. But I could sense that in each man's chest burned the same realization. We had fought, bled, and endured with all our strength. Yet in the end, a cup of cold water, a bitter sip of coffee, a tablet of medicine forced us to bow to the truth that our world had fallen behind. When I returned to my village, I saw my frail mother waiting at the doorway, her face worn with hardship. I embraced her, but inside me swelled a painful memory of the American camp's hot showers and scented soap. Here at home, my mother still fetched icy well water to wash herself quickly, without comfort. I saw the neighbor's child coughing violently, and at once I thought of those aspirin tablets the Americans handed out so casually. Shame struck me deeply. My country had failed to protect its own people. Yet, at that very moment, a spark of hope flickered in me. I realized that if Japan were to rise again, we had to change. We had to learn from those seemingly trivial things. We had to make cold water, coffee, soap, music, and medicine part of ordinary life for every citizen, not privileges offered in the prison of a foreign enemy. Years later, when Japan had begun to recover, I sat in a small kitchen in Tokyo, opening a new refrigerator I had finally bought. I poured myself a glass of cold water, dropped in a few cubes of ice. Watching the droplets form on the outside of the glass, I was transported back to that first day in the camp, the day when Japanese prisoners nearly fought each other over a sip of chilled water. I took a sip and whispered to myself, "We have come a long way." The war had stolen so much, yet the experiences in that camp had given me a lesson I could never forget. True strength lies not only in weapons, but in the way a nation lives each day. And to ensure we would never bow our heads again, Japan had to build a better life for its people. On that day, I was a prisoner. Today, I am a witness. And the story of a cup of ice water, a bitter coffee, a stream of hot water, a foreign song, and a small pill. They all remain with me, reminders that defeat is not only to be mourned, but to be learned from, so that change can be born.